Eyebrows were raised during the offseason when the Denver Broncos handed former Seattle Seahawks QB Russell Wilson a mammoth contract, and it's safe to say things haven't quite gone to plan for Wilson in Colorado. Some have even gone as far as to call it one of the worst deals in history. Today, we are discussing Wilson's tough start to life in Denver, plus some possible trade destinations for him. Stay with us. Let's jump straight in and look at claims of the worst deal in sports history. As we know, sports fans have a tendency for the dramatic, but with the Denver Broncos suffering from some pretty horrible form of late, attention is turned to their new star quarterback. When they brought Russell Wilson in over the past offseason, the AFC West was seen as the perfect battleground for some superb matchups, with Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Derek Carr, and Justin Herbert supposed to lead their teams in some intriguing affairs. But with the record of 4-10 so far, things haven't quite played out like that for Wilson and the Broncos. Following the Broncos' disappointing 23-10 loss to the Panthers at the end of November, Wilson came in for some serious criticism as the Denver outfit dropped their third game in a row. They were a shambles in offense, for want of a better word, against a team who have also been pretty poor throughout the season. Wilson was one of the worst offenders when it came to poor performances, and it hasn't gotten much better since then, with the Broncos losing the following two games to the Baltimore Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs, respectively. They did get back to winning ways last time out, as they beat the equally poor Arizona Cardinals 24-15 this past weekend. Wilson's performances have been seriously worrying so far, and what seemed like a sure thing for the Broncos over the summer has turned into what can only really be described as a nightmare so far. We're discussing some of the reactions to Wilson's poor form now. Stay tuned. Wilson came in for some pretty heavy criticism after the Panthers game, but he was even catching bullets during the game itself from one of his own teammates. Broncos defensive lineman Michael Purcell was clearly unhappy with what was unfolding and took it out on Wilson, getting up in his face, although we don't know what was said. Retired NFL player Orlando Franklin also went in on the former Seahawk, taking to Twitter to claim that Russ is broken. He then went on to add, "The last series absolutely horrible. The Panthers are calling timeouts because they have the Broncos number, and no, they could have stole a possession there before half. Wow, just wow." Betting content creator Joe Osborne went one better by referencing the huge amount of money Wilson is being paid for his subpar performances, whilst also claiming his best days were well behind him. He took to Twitter to say, "This Russell Wilson trade, plus $245 million contract extension, has got to be in contention for the worst transaction in sports history. He's legit not even a top 20 QB. Brutal." Others focused on coach Nathaniel Hackett, suggesting the Broncos need to get rid of him. However, Barstool Sports' Tommy Smokes also appeared convinced the problem was Russell, saying the Broncos' Russell Wilson trade/contract is going to go down as the worst deal in sports history. Threw away picks and cap space for a legitimately bad quarterback. What do you guys think of the Wilson trade so far? Next up, we're looking at some potential trade destinations, starting with the Lions. The jury is possibly still out on Jared Goff in Detroit, having been traded to the Lions last year. He has been a decent acquisition, but he hasn't quite hit the heights they would have hoped for when bringing him in from the Rams. The likelihood of the Lions going to the Super Bowl with Goff calling the shots is also unlikely, so they are probably going to need to switch it up at QB during the upcoming offseason if they are to seriously challenge. There is much hype surrounding Aiden Hutchinson on defense, and rightly so. The 22-year-old is seen as one of the biggest talents in a generation, so if they can build around him and then improve on offense, they could be a potential threat next time out. Goff's contract might be a stumbling block, however, but thankfully for the Lions, they inserted an out clause which kicks in at the end of this season. Some have even suggested that a direct trade involving Goff going the other way to Denver could take place, as they look to bring in something of a stopgap on the way to simply getting Wilson off the books. His monster contract is something they will probably want to be rid of as soon as possible, considering his performances of late, and they could see Goff as a potential answer to those particular prayers. They could also try and package Wilson for picks, and then sign Goff as a free agent if he is cut from the Lions. What about the Buccaneers? Let's see. As everyone around the NFL knows, Tom Brady hasn't decided on his immediate future, and retirement is a very real possibility. He could choose to go again with the Bucs. He could just as easily decide to call it a day after a spectacular career. Should the latter materialize, then the Tampa Bay outfit would need to plug a pretty sizable gap. It is likely that even if he does decide to play one more year, that it won't be with the Buccaneers anyway. But whilst he hasn't decided yet, the possibility still remains, however small it may be, that Brady is offered another deal in Florida. The Bucs will need to plan for the inevitable anyway and cannot afford to go into next season not having addressed the QB position. They had no proper plan to move forward without Brady last year and kind of got away with it when he reversed his retirement. They cannot afford for that to happen again. The Tampa roster could be something that Russell Wilson sees as ideal, and his own abilities to rush and make his own plays could fit well with the Tampa offense. Should they bring Wilson in, then that could be the catalyst for a more dynamic Tampa offense, whilst simultaneously alleviating some of the pressure on the defense. Wilson could also be going into an environment already set up for winning, so could flourish more so than he is doing now. The Commanders are up next. Stay tuned. It seems as though the Washington Commanders have needed a QB for the better part of eternity right now, but they never seem to have the pieces accumulated across the rest of the roster to tempt one of the elite free agents to take a punt on them. There have also been questions raised about the team's ownership, which is probably putting big players off from making the move. 2023 could be a little different, however, as Wilson is thought to be after a fresh start, and where better than the opposite side of the country. He could also benefit from a lack of pressure too. Everyone knows the Commanders aren't viewed the same way as the Broncos, so an environment such as this could be perfect for Wilson to find his form once again. Also, if the Commanders are able to do some shrewd business in the rookie draft, they could easily find themselves with a nice blend of experience and promise. If they manage to move Carson Wentz on, potentially even to the Broncos, then this one could have a serious chance of materializing. Do you guys think Wilson would do well for the Commanders? We're talking the Saints now. Stick around. The Saints have suffered a double whammy in the past few years with the retirement of QB legend Drew Brees, as well as former head coach Sean Payton. The New Orleans outfit has struggled for consistency, which has been highlighted by frequent trips to the doctor's office for Jameis Winston, who just cannot seem to stay fit. Whilst they also have Taysom Hill as an option, he's probably never going to challenge for a regular starting spot, and we can also assume they don't plan on keeping Andy Dalton as their starting QB long-term. Bringing in Wilson would be a statement for the Saints, as he has been one of the most consistent QBs of the past decade. Of course, he is struggling this year, but talent doesn't just disappear overnight. He is still mobile despite being one of the game's elder statesmen, and a team with some truly explosive playmakers could certainly benefit from that. With Alvin Kamara also doing his thing, it wouldn't just be down to Wilson to do it all. One stumbling block could potentially be Taysom Hill's contract. However, if the Broncos don't decide to go down that particular route, they may choose to take a punt on a wild card simply to get Wilson's huge contract off the books. What do you make of this one? And finally, how about the New York Giants? Most around the game are in agreement that the Giants probably won't hand Daniel Jones another deal thanks to his less than inspiring form since being drafted back in 2019. The Giants are known to have plenty of financial muscle these days, so this, coupled with their diminished belief in Jones, means that they will almost certainly move for a new QB this offseason. They also have plenty of cap space to play with, so they could potentially move for Wilson, and all signs point to it being a perfect trade for both parties. Wilson and his wife Sierra would almost certainly relish the opportunity of living in the Big Apple, given their lifestyle, and the roster is jam-packed with talented players. One thing that might force Wilson to think twice is the fact that New York sports teams are often expected to perform at the very pinnacle of their respective sports, so if he thinks there has been pressure on him in Denver, it's likely that won't be any different in New York. Do you see Wilson turning out for Big Blue? Let us know below. As always, thanks for dropping by today, and remember to tune in again next time for some more fun reveals. And why not do us a solid by liking and sharing today's video, whilst also subscribing to our channel so you don't miss out on more great bits in the future. Bye guys!